Hello my dear students, we are going to discuss one of the most important institutions, Ombudsman. After going through this module, we should be able to deliberate upon the concept of Ombudsman, to state the position and role of Ombudsman, to analyze the jurisdiction of Ombudsman, to comprehend the historical roots of the institution of Ombudsman, and to know the legislation pertaining to the institution of Ombudsman. I have divided the presentation into two main parts. In the first part, we shall be dealing with the concept and history of Ombudsman, and in the second part of the presentation, it will be restricted to the study of Ombudsman in Indian context. The institution of Ombudsman came into existence in some countries to register a small man's battle against red tape and administrative injustice. The earliest democratic institution created in the world for the redressal of citizens' grievance is the Scandinavian institution of Ombudsman. Donald C. Robert, an international authority on the Ombudsman, call it a uniquely appropriate institution for dealing with the average citizen's complaints about unfair administrative actions. Ombud is a Swedish term and refers to a person who acts as the representative or spokesman of another person. Ombudsman literally means a delegate or an agent. According to Donald C. Robert, Ombudsman refers to an officer appointed by the legislature to handle complaints against the administrative and judicial action. The institution of Ombudsman was first created in Sweden in year 1809, firstly against the monarch and then against the administration. In Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Ombudsman is chosen by the parliament and in consequences responsible only to that body. From Sweden, this institution of Ombudsman spread to other Scandinavian countries like Finland, Denmark, Norway. New Zealand is the first Commonwealth country in the world to have adopted the institution of Ombudsman in the form of Parliamentary Commissioner for Investigation in year 1960. The United Kingdom adopted Ombudsman-like institution with the name tag as Parliamentary Commissioner for Administration in 1967. Since then, more than 40 countries of the world have adopted Ombudsman-like institutions with different nomenclature and function. The Ombudsman in India is called Lokpal, Lokayukta. Donald C. Roberts says that the institution of Ombudsman is a bulwark of democratic government against the tyranny of officialdom. While Gerald E. Caden describes the Ombudsman as institutionalized public conscience. Another unique institutional device created for the redressal of citizen grievance against the administration. The Swedish Ombudsman deals with the citizen's grievance, which involve abuse of administrative discretion, that is, the misuse of official power and authority, maladministration, that is, inefficiency in achieving the targets, administrative corruption, that is, demanding bribery for doing things, nepotism, that is, supporting one's own kith and kin in matters like providing employment, discourtesy, that is, misbehavior of various kinds, for instance, use of abusive language. The Swedish Ombudsman is appointed by the Parliament for a term of 4 years. He can be removed only by the Parliament on the grounds of loss of confidence in him. He submits annual report to the Parliament and hence is known as Parliamentary Ombudsman. But he is independent of Parliament as well as executive and judiciary. The Ombudsman is a constitutional authority that enjoys the powers to supervise compliance of laws and regulations by the public officials and see that they discharge their duties properly. In other words, he keeps a watch over all the public officials, civil, judicial and military, so that they function impartially, objectively and in accordance with law. However, he has no power to reverse or crash a decision and has no direct control over the administration or the court. The Ombudsman can act either on the basis of complaint received from the citizen against unfair administrative action or suo motu, that is, on his own initiative, he can prosecute any erring official including the judges. However, he himself cannot inflict any punishment. He only reports the matter to the higher authorities for taking the necessary corrective action. Dear students, we can briefly limelight the characteristics of Swedish institution of Ombudsman as it originated therefrom. Number 1, independence of action from the executive, impartial and objective investigation of complaints, suo motu power to start investigation, uninterrupted access to all the files of administration, right to report to the Parliament as opposed to the executive. The institution of Ombudsman is based on the doctrine of administrative accountability to legislature. Wide publicity given to its working in press and other media. Direct, simple, informal, cheap and speedy method of handling complaints. When we talk about the position of Ombudsman in India there was a need felt for establishing the powerful institution similar to that of institution of Ombudsman. In India, the Ombudsman is known as Lokpal or Lokayukt. The Administrative Reform Commission of India recommended the setting up of 2 special authorities designated as Lokpal and Lokayukt for the redressal of citizens' grievance. These institutions were to be set up on the pattern of institution of Ombudsman in the Scandinavian countries and the Parliamentary Commissioner for Investigation in New Zealand. The Lokpal would deal with the complaints against ministers and secretaries at centre and state levels, and the Lokayukt, one at the centre and one in the state, would deal with the complaints against other specialized higher officials. The Administrative Reforms Commission of India kept the judiciary outside the purview of Lokpal and Lokayukt as in New Zealand, but in Sweden the judiciary is within the purview of Ombudsman. According to Administrative Reforms Committee, the Lokpal would be appointed by the President after consultation with the Chief Justice of India, the Speaker of Lok Sabha and the Chairman of Rajya Sabha. The Administrative Reforms Commission also recommended that the institution of Lokpal and Lokayukt should have certain features. They should be demonstratively independent and impartial. Their investigations and proceedings should be conducted in private and should be informal in character. Their appointment should be as far as possible non-political. Their status should compare with the highest judicial functionaries in the country. They should deal with the matters in the discretionary field involving acts of injustice, corruption or favoritism. Their proceedings should not be subject to judicial interference. they should have the maximum latitude and powers in obtaining information relevant to their duties. The Government of India accepted the recommendation and 10 official attempts were made to bring about the legislation by introducing various bills in this regard. However, none of the bills were passed by the Parliament due to one or other reason. The first 4 bills out of this 10 lapsed due to the dissolution of Lok Sabha, while the 5th one was withdrawn by the government. The 6th and 7th bills also lapsed due to the dissolution of 11th and 12th Lok Sabha. Again, the 8th bill lapsed due to the dissolution of the 13th Lok Sabha in year 2004. The 9th bill was withdrawn by the government. Hence, the institution of Lokpal did not come into existence in our country, though its need was felt long before. Dear students, we shall now briefly limelight 2011 Lokpal Bill, what it contained, what it was all about. In order to meet a long-standing demand to establish a mechanism for dealing complaints on corruption against public functionaries, including corruption at higher places, the government had constituted a joint drafting committee on 18th of April 2011, consisting of 5 nominee ministers from the Government of India and 5 nominees of Anna Hazare, including Hazare himself, to prepare a draft of Lokpal Bill. Based on their deliberations, the committee and on the basis of inputs received from the Chief Minister of States and the political parties, the government prepared a revised Lokpal Bill in year 2011, which was introduced in the Lok Sabha on 4th of August 2011. The said bill was referred to the department-related Parliamentary Standing Committee on Personal Public Grievance, Law and Justice on 8th August 2011 for examination and report. The department-related Parliamentary Standing Committee, after extensive discussion with all the stakeholders, has in its 48th report made a number of recommendations suggesting major amendments in the bill, both as regards the scope and content of the bill, including that necessary provisions be made in the union legislation for establishment of lokayukts in the states, so as to provide leverage to the states where no such institution exists, and to bring uniformity in the laws related to state lokayuktas which are already in existence in a number of states. The committee also recommended that Lokpal and Lokayukt should be conferred constitutional status. Upon consideration of recommendations of the department-related Parliamentary Standing Committee, the government withdrew the Lokpal Bill 2011 pending in the Lok Sabha and introduced a comprehensive Lokpal and Lokayukt Bill 2011 in the Lok Sabha on 22nd of December 2011 to establish the institution of Lokpal at centre and Lokayukt at the state levels. The bill provided a uniform vigilance and anti-corruption roadmap for the nation both at the centre and at the state. The bill institutionalized separation of investigation from prosecution and thereby removes conflict of interests as well as increases the scope of professionalism and specialization. Also, keeping in mind the recommendations of Standing Committee that the Lokpal and Lokayukt may be made constitutional bodies, the government also introduced the Constitutional 116th Amendment Bill 2011 to provide for the constitutional status of these bodies. These bills were taken up for consideration by Lok Sabha on 27th of December 2011. The Government of India accepted the recommendations of Administrative Reforms Commission in this regard, So far, 10 official attempts have been made to bring about the legislation on the subject. Lokpal and Lokayukta Bill 2011 was passed with certain amendments, whereas the Constitutional 116th Amendment Bill 2011 could not be passed with the requisite majority required for the constitutional amendment. The Lokpal and Lokayukta Bill 2011 was taken up for discussion and passing in the Rajya Sabha on 29th of December 2011. The discussion remained inconclusive, and the Lokpal and Lokayukta Bill 2011 again was not passed by the Rajya Sabha. The bill seeks to provide for the establishment of a body of Lokpal for the Union and Lokayukta for the states to inquire into the allegations of corruption against certain public functionaries and for that matter connected therewith or incidental thereto. The salient features of the bill included Lokpal to consist of a chairperson and up to 8 members, not less than 50% of the members to be from scheduled castes, scheduled tribes or other backward classes, minorities and women. Provision for selection committee for selection of chairperson and the members and a search committee of at least 7 members. Again, not less than 50% of whom to be from scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, other backward classes, minorities and women. Another feature, Lokpal to have jurisdiction over the public functionary who is or has been the Prime Minister, Ministers of the Union, Member of Parliament, public servant as defined under Prevention of Corruption Act 1988, belonging to Group A, Group B, Group C or Group D functionary of any body or board or corporation or authority or company or society or trust or autonomous body established by the Act of Parliament, wholly or partially financed by the central government or controlled by it. Functionary of such bodies or organizations aided by the government and the annual income of which exceeds the amount notified by the central government, functionary of such body or organization in receipt of donation from public and their annual income exceeded an amount notified by the central government or where such bodies, organizations receive donation from any foreign source under Foreign Contribution Regulation Act in excess of Rs 10 lakh in a year. Another feature, Lokpal to have under it an independent inquiry and prosecution wing, separation of investigation from prosecution thereby, removing the conflict of interests and increasing the scope for professionalism and specialization. Lokpal to have power of superintendence and directions over any investigating agency including CBI or cases referred to them by the Lokpal. On prior sanction required for launching prosecution in cases inquired by Lokpal or initiated on the direction and with the approval of Lokpal. Provision for attachment and confiscation of property acquired by corrupt means even while prosecution is pending. Appointment of director, CBI to be on the recommendations of high-powered committee chaired by the Prime Minister. Specific timeline for preliminary inquiry, investigation and trial. Enhancement of minimum and maximum punishment under the Prevention of Corruption Act from 6 months to 2 years and from 7 years to 10 years respectively. Another feature, Lokpal to have powers to recommend, transfer or suspension of public servant connected with allegations of corruption. Lokpal empowered to constitute sufficient number of special courts to provide for lokayukts in states on similar lines. While the central government was still debating the establishment of institution of Lokpal, many states had already set up the institution of Lokayuktas. It must be noted that the institution of Lokayukta was established first in Maharashtra in year 1971. Although Odisha had passed the act in this regard in year 1970, it came into force only in 1983. Again, when we talk about Lokayuktas, there are certain structural variations in it. The structure of Lokayukta is not same in all the states. Some states like Rajasthan, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh and Maharashtra have created the Lokayukta as well as Uplokayukta, while some others like Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh have created only the Lokayukta. There are several other states like Punjab, Orissa that have designated officials as Lokpal. This pattern was not suggested by ARC in the states. When we talk about the appointment of Lokayuktas and Uplokayuktas, they are appointed by the governor of the state. While appointing them, the governor in most of the state consults number 1, Chief Justice of State, number 2, the leader of opposition in the state. And talking about the qualification of these institutions, judicial qualifications have been prescribed for the Lokayukta in the states of Uttar Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat, Orissa, Karnataka, Assam, but no specific qualifications are prescribed in the states of Bihar, Maharashtra and Rajasthan. While limelighting the tenure, the bill provided that in most of the states the term of office is fixed for Lokayukta, which is 5 years duration or 65 years of age, whichever is earlier. He is not eligible for reappointment for a second term. While talking about the jurisdiction or while going through the jurisdiction of these institutions, you will find that there is no uniformity regarding the jurisdiction of Lokayukta in all the states. Certain points can be raised in this regard. The chief minister is included within the jurisdiction of Lokayukta in the states of Himachal Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat, while he is excluded from the purview of Lokayukta in the state of Maharashtra, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Orissa. Ministers and higher civil servants are included in the purview of Lokayukta in almost all the states. Maharashtra has also included former ministers and civil servants. Members of state legislatures are included in the purview of Lokayukta in the state of Andhra Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh, Gujarat, Uttar Pradesh and Assam. The authorities of the local bodies, corporations, companies and societies are included in the jurisdiction of Lokayukta in most of the states. Pointing towards the investigative provisions, the most of the states, the Lokayukta initiate the investigations either on the basis of complaint received from the citizens against unfair administrative action or suo motu. But he does not enjoy the power to start investigations on his own in the state of Uttar Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh and Assam. Limelighting the scope and the cases covered under the bill, the Lokayukta can consider the cases of grievances as well as allegations in the state of Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh, Assam, Bihar and Karnataka. But in Himachal Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, Rajasthan and Gujarat, the job of Lokayukta is confined to the investigating agencies and investigating the allegations of corruption and not the grievances, that is maladministration. Other features of the bill include the Lokayukta present annually to the governor of the state a consolidated report on his performance. The governor places this report along with the explanatory memorandum before the state legislatures. The Lokayukta is also responsible to the state legislature. He takes the help of state investigating agencies for conducting inquiries. He can call for relevant files and documents from the state government departments. The recommendations made by the Lokayukta are only advisory and not binding on the state government. However, in May 2012, the bill was referred to a select committee of Rajya Sabha to try and develop a consensus on the disputed issues. After the report of the select committee, the bill passed and received the assent of the President, thereby becoming the Act. That is, the Lokpal and Lokayukta Act 2014. The salient features of the Act. Number 1. It was passed by the Parliament in December 2013 and got presidential assent on 1st January 2014. Number 2. It aims to prevent and control corruption through the setting up of an independent and empowered body at the central level, called the Lokpal, that would receive complaints related to corruption against most categories of public servants and ensure that these are properly investigated and where warranted effectively prosecuted. All this is envisaged in a time-bound manner with the help of special courts set up for the purpose. Another one, the Act also makes it incumbent for each state to pass within a year a law setting up a body of Lokayuktas at the state level, but leaves it to the state to work out the details. The Act also has the provision for process of investigating and prosecuting complaints of corruption. The Lokpal and Lokayukta Act 2014 provides for setting up a body called the Lokpal at the center level to have complaints of corruption against various categories of public servants. The Act makes it mandatory for the states to set up Lokayuktas within 1 year from the passing of the Act, but the nature and the type of Lokayukta is left to the discretion of the state legislatures. The legislation envisages that Lokpal would receive complaints of corruption against the Prime Minister, ministers, members of Parliament, officers of central government, and against functionaries of every entity that is wholly or partly financed by the government with the annual income above as specified limit, and also all entities receiving donations from foreign sources in excess of 10 lakh per year. The Act states that on receipt of a complaint against any public servant, except for the officers from Group A, B, C or D, the Lokpal will order a preliminary inquiry against the public servant. The Lokpal will refer the complaint to the Central Vigilance Commission (CVC) for the preliminary inquiry. After the completion of the preliminary inquiry, the CVC will submit its report to the Lokpal in respect of public servants belonging to the Group A or B, while in cases of public servants belonging to Group C or D, the CVC will proceed in accordance with the provisions of CVC Act 2003. The investigation has to be ordinarily completed within 6 months, extendable up to 1 year, and a report has to be submitted to the appropriate government having jurisdiction, with a copy being sent to the Lokpal. The Lokpal may grant sanction to its own prosecution wing or the investigating agency to file a charge sheet before the special court, or direct filing of a closure report, or direct initiation of departmental proceedings against the concerned public servant. Superintendence and administrative control over the CBI. The Act also envisages that the Lokpal will have powers to superintendence over CBI. However, the experience has shown that such powers are meaningless without instruments to ensure actual administrative control. The Act empowers the Lokpal with partial administrative control over CBI, as it states that transfer of CBI officers investigating cases referred by the Lokpal can be done only with the approval of Lokpal. Unfortunately, all this is still not adequate to provide the required functional independence to CBI. Power and jurisdiction of Lokayukta in states. The biggest shortcoming of the Act is that while it makes it mandatory for Lokayukta to be set up in each state within 1 year, state legislators will be free to determine the powers and jurisdiction of Lokayukta. When we talk about the limitation period, the Act envisages that Lokpal shall not inquire or investigate into any complaint if the complaint is made after the expiry of 7 years from the date of which the offence mentioned in such complaint is alleged to have been committed. When we talk about accountability, the Act falls short on several counts on ensuring the accountability of Lokpal. Being a high-powered anti-corruption agency with powers of inquiry, investigation and prosecution, strong measures were required to ensure the accountability of the institutions and officials of the Lokpal. Complaints against the chairman and members of Lokpal. The Lokpal and Lokayukta Act envisages that any complaint against any member or chairperson of the Lokpal will be taken cognizance of only if it is signed by at least 100 MPs. Complaints of corruption against Lokpal staff. The Act envisages that Lokpal would itself deal with the complaints of corruption against its own staff. The Indian Lokpal is synonymous to institution of ombudsman existing in Scandinavian countries. The office of ombudsman originated in Sweden in year 1809 and adopted eventually by many nations as safeguard of democratic government against the tyranny of bureaucracy. Ombudsman is a Swedish word that stands for an officer appointed by the legislature to handle complaints against administrative and judicial action. Traditionally, the ombudsman is appointed based on unanimity among all the political parties supporting the proposal. The incumbent, though appointed by the legislature, is an independent functionary, independent of all the three organs of the state, but reports to the legislature. The ombudsman can act both on the basis of complaint made by the citizen or suo motu. It can look into the allegations of corruption as well as maladministration. The process of leading to the enactment of Lokpal and Lokayukta Act started in year 2010 when the government formulated a new Lokpal bill. The bill, however, was widely criticized for being weak. In December 2011, the revised and renamed Lokpal and Lokayukta Bill 2011 was introduced but could not pass in the Rajya Sabha due to one reason or the other reason. In May 2012, the bill was referred to a select committee of the Rajya Sabha to try and develop a consensus on the disputed issues. After the report, the select committee, the bill passed and received the assent of President and thereby became an act in 2014. It was passed by Parliament in December 2013 and got presidential assent on 1st January 2014. It aims to prevent and control corruption through setting up of an independent and empowered body at the central level called the Lokpal and would receive complaints related to corruption against most categories of public servants and ensure that these are properly investigated and where warranted effectively prosecuted. All this is envisaged in a time-bound manner with the help of special courts set up for the purpose. The Act also makes it incumbent for each state to pass within a year a law setting up a body of Lokayukt at the state level, but leaves it for the states to work out the details. That's all for today's lecture. Hope you understood and enjoyed the lecture. Thank you.